Would you like to learn about workplace bullying and what you can do to stop it now? If your answer is a yes, then you've come to the right place. More after this. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inclusive Workplaces with Amara. I am your host, Amarachi Adanaya Igboegwu, and I am so excited to be here with you today. On this show, I share best practices to help people managers create a more inclusive workplace culture. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is so important, workplace bullying. And to help us guide the conversation today and help us, give us some new insights on how to stop workplace bullying. We have an incredible guest today. Her name is Nicki Eyre, and I can't wait to introduce you to her. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you, Amara. It's lovely to be here. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you today.
Absolutely, and I'm super excited to have you here as well. And I can't wait to get the ball rolling. Let's just do this, right? Yeah. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well and really excited to have this conversation. But before we jump in, though, Nikki, I definitely want to share with the world the incredible work you're already doing around building awareness around workplace bullying. So Nicki Eyre is the founder of Conduct Change and an advocate of building a workplace which is psychologically safe, with a particular interest in tackling workplace bullying as part of an overall approach to improving workplace culture and well-being. She offers business consultancy, training, and coaching about workplace bullying. She's dedicated her career to raising awareness on the impact of bullying, as well as offers practical and pragmatic solutions to organizations who want to improve the way they handle bullying and toxic behavior. She is also the chief campaigning officer for the Stop Hurt at Work campaign, which is currently focusing on raising awareness and seeking formal recognition on workplace bullying as a problem that injures individuals and damages organizations. Nicki Eyre, welcome to the
show. Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so Nikki and I are going to be talking about the topic of the day is, stop workplace bullying now, because we know it's so prevalent and we need to address it and, raise awareness around this, because a lot of times people don't even know they're being bullied. I had a conversation with a colleague of mine. She was like, yeah, I really need to talk about this because sometimes we don't even know we're being bullied. And so really excited to start this conversation. But before we go in, though, Nikki, would you like to share how you started this path, like your path to, working in this field?
Absolutely. So as with a lot of people who end up working in this area, I was actually bullied at work myself. So I went through that experience and it was really a challenging time. And it was only kind of afterwards that I realized how much damage it had done to me personally, but also how long it was going to take me to recover. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I discovered was I started learning more about kind of what had happened to me, what workplace bullying was. And I discovered that as I was speaking up about it, then people were more likely to share their experiences with me. So as a coach, that kind of enabled me to sort of talk to people and allow them to explore what had happened and their experiences. And I started off by collecting a few case studies and then doing a few talks about my own experience. Mm-hmm. And I realized that actually there was a huge need for this. Mm. And one of the things you mentioned there is a lot of people don't realize that they're being bullied. And actually, I was the same. I didn't realize what was happening for a long time. And by the time I came to report it, I couldn't really articulate what had happened to me. And so, as with most people, it was a failed case. I brought a grievance and it failed. So I think, a lot of people find themselves in that position. And when I started doing the talks and the training, people were suddenly saying, wow, yeah, I've just realized that I was bullied. I never really thought about it like that. Right. And And that's one of the things is you can have all these lists of different kind of bullying behaviours on a piece of paper, but when people actually talk about them, it brings them to life.
Right.
And so I did basically just kind of grew the business from there. So more coaching with people. I upskilled in terms of the training that I could do. So that it didn't just go from awareness, it went to start looking at prevention.
Mm-hmm.
I connected with some incredible experts around the world. Do the International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment. So I've spoken to psychologists so that we can look
Wow.
at putting together trauma-informed approaches to workplace bullying. I've trained in
Absolutely.
psychological safety. It's absolutely grown from there. And it's really interesting because I've gone from what a horrendous experience to what an incredibly fascinating topic. And if I can
Right.
just pick up on the stop hurt at work very quickly. Sorry, I'll let you get a word in a minute.
Go ahead.
The stop hurt at work is actually where we're really starting with that. Is there's no legislation in the UK for workplace bullying.
Right.
And so it's trying to get it actually enacted into law, so to get it defined and put into law,
Right.
so that people have a level playing field when they go into a tribunal.
Absolutely. And first of all, I want to commend you because I think, many people would just, get stuck and just really be devastated by the experience. But I really like how you've kind of turned those lemons to lemonade, and now you're helping so many people out there, helping them cope, helping them also have a more preventive, approach, especially with organizations. So I think you're doing a fantastic job. And I definitely want this to be a great opportunity to share, what workplace bullying is really all about. And already we've got lots of people sharing. So I want to just quickly, show you how much, people are really enjoying what you're saying. We have Dr. Joseph Adegbuega, who says, great idea. What you're doing. This is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Adegbuega. Thank you. And then we also have Juliet, who says, awesome. I think she also works in this field. I know her very well. She's a good friend of mine. So she also knows about trauma-informed work. And, this is something that definitely resonates with her. And we have Annette as well, Annette Shaw, who says bullying can be insidious. So true. So I think we're definitely on a good, on a good trajectory here. So very much looking forward to, please keep sending your comments and questions. We're looking forward to having a very engaged conversation. I always love to start with definitions. And I guess the first question, of course, is, what is workplace bullying? Could you share with us what is it really?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I just touched on that very briefly there, that there's no legal definition of workplace bullying in the UK. And actually there's no consistent kind of even worldwide definition of it. One of the definitions that tends to be used in the UK is one that was picked up by ACAS, and they use the phrase bullying can be characterised as offensive, intimidating, malicious or insulting behaviour, an abuse or misuse of power through means that undermine, humiliate, denigrate or injure the recipient. Now that definition was used because actually it came from a court case, which was Daniel versus the Secretary of State for the Home Department. I'd love to say that I can remember this. I am actually reading this from a piece of paper. Actually, the judge in that trial, for the first time ever, tried to come up with a definition of workplace bullying. And so that's where that has come from originally. But generally speaking, there's a pattern of behaviour. There's an imbalance of power. And there's some level of harm that is done there as well. I think what's really important is when I'm talking about bullying, I talk about it as a spectrum of behaviours. And harassment or harassment, however you prefer to say it, is, for me, that is bullying, but with a protected characteristic attached to it. So race, gender, age, disability, all of those kind of things. And that does have a really clear definition. And that is within the Equality Act 2010, and that's unwanted conduct related to a relevant protected characteristic which has the purpose or effect of violating an individual's dignity or creating and intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment for that individual. So that is set in law. And so that is very clear. And that means that when somebody brings a case, then they have a very clear definition to
work from.
Yeah. And they're also protected from, well, they're protected all the time. So if you were going to a workplace, you're protected from the application stage. With bullying,
great. It's a good thing.
yeah, absolutely, and absolutely essential. But the thing with bullying, when it is not anything to do with a protected characteristic, then actually what happens is you either have to be in your job for 2 years, and then you can bring a case by leaving, and then being able to bring a case for something like constructive dismissal, or it has to be so bad that you have a psychiatric injury, and then you can go through the civil courts. Those are your options. And so
that
for
anybody
in the first 2 years of a job who finds themselves feeling bullied, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Right.
So they have very little comeback at this stage. But essentially what we're looking at is that spectrum of behaviours where there's an imbalance of power, there's a pattern of behaviour, and there's some form of harm that can be done as a result of that behaviour.
Right. And I think we could also add recurring, right? Could it also be recurring when this behavior reoccurs?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And I think it doesn't have to be the same behaviour that occurs. I think for me, what's really important is the impact of that behaviour on the other person. Right. So I think that's really, really big. Gosh, we've got lots more comments coming through.
I know, lots of comments said. I want to just highlight some of them here. I have, yes. Oh, Leslie Neidick, she's here. Oh, fantastic. She says, remote workers are also experiencing bullying. Physical distance doesn't stop it. Yeah, so one would think that, in the remote world that would, end workplace bullying, but no, right?
No, it doesn't. And actually it can be even more intense. What you're doing is when you're, if I was on a call with somebody who was bullying me, then you're almost letting that bully into your home. So you haven't even got that, delineation of space at that point either. So the physical space is like they're in your home with you. So yeah, really.
Absolutely. And that's even, that's even more difficult to deal with, I would say, when it's in your private space, right? Yeah. And we have Annette Shaw as well. She says, I'm also a life coach helping women who are bullied in the workplace. This is as a result of my own experiences with workplace bullying. You see, it's like, I'm telling you, this thing is, it's quite rampant, actually.
It is.
You'd be very surprised. To hear people's stories, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's everywhere. It's across every sector, and it's across the world as well.
Right, absolutely. And okay, we have Kai here. She says, leaders have to be aware of their power and what it yields to have inclusive workplaces. Absolutely, Kai. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I think that, this sums it up brilliantly.
Yeah. Can I borrow that?
And Kevin's here too. Hello. Thank you so much for joining in. He's enjoying the conversation. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Your presence, of course, always super awesome. Oh, we've got lots more. Wow, this is great. We have Paige here. Paige McKee, she says, sounds like IPV, interpersonal violence. I'm a social entrepreneur working on a large equity project, interested in any research on the links between IPV perpetrators and workplace bullying. Fantastic. Well, this is absolutely great. Thank you so much for joining in. And I think that we can carry that conversation, forward. Absolutely. And I want to turn to it's another question. It's just, we've got the definition now, and I'm really curious to know, why does this actually happen? I mean, I would expect that when we hire people through HR, that we're not hiring bullies. I mean, obviously, nobody has "I'm a bully" written on their foreheads, right? So that's kind of hard to determine. But why does this actually happen? What do you think Yeah.
I think there's a
Create
couple
the
of different
environment.
sides. Yeah, there's a couple of different sides to this. When you hear people talk about workplace bullying, they'll quite often start recording to people as psychopaths and things like that. And actually, we know that it's a really tiny percentage, about 1% of the entire population are psychopaths.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There is some research that says, that you've got a higher percentage in leadership roles than other roles. But the long and short of it is actually there are a great many reasons why people bully. And it can be that they're struggling themselves, and therefore their behaviour changes.
Okay.
So they lash out at other people. It can be that they have had some sort of trauma in their past life, or happening outside of work at the moment, and that's affecting their behaviour. It may be that they are out of their depth and they haven't had the right training to help them, particularly with things like, emotional intelligence and the real people management side of things.
Right.
But there are a small group of people who are manipulative. They are out to just walk all over other people, and it's very it's egotistical, self-centered. The strongest survive, the weakest can just be walked over, and they will just be out for themselves. So a real lack of self-awareness and empathy for other people in that situation.
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to touch on one thing you mentioned, but please finish. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the other side of that is that we have working practices that actually increase opportunities for bullying. So where there is an overload of work, and we're setting targets that are just unachievable, which is increasing the stress levels of people, and therefore it impacts on the behaviour around them. The people who have no control over their work and their hours, and they're expected to just keep going. The things like the connecting with people out of hours, instead of having the right to disconnect. It can be about whether there is enough support and training within the role. But one of the really key things is, if there is a culture in the workplace where behaviours that could be seen as bullying behaviours are actually allowed to perpetrate, where they are rewarded rather than punished, where people are not held accountable, then that bullying behaviour will persist, basically. Yeah. And when you go into a new organisation, you absorb some of those entrenched behaviours. So sometimes people take on behaviours because they've absorbed them, and they take them on an unconscious level,
right,
and just gradually change, because that's how they can progress in the organisation.
Yeah,
so they're not even aware that it's happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the unwritten code. It's implicit, right? So people just, they see it and they feel it, and they just repeat it. Yes. Actually, I wanted to talk about something, like, kind of go back to what you said about trauma, and how sometimes one of the reasons we have people who have maybe childhood trauma, and the workplace is another area where people do. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. Like your past experiences will impact how you work with people, and so sometimes that could also be trauma. And that's difficult, because how do you deal with people who are carrying trauma in the workplace and causing harm?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting one. Paige was talking about kind of interpersonal violence, and when people have domestic abuse at home, and they're coming into work. So for some people, it might be their safe space, but for other people, they might have had, even earlier traumas in their life, and they're bringing that trauma with them. And there could be any kind of trigger in the workplace. It could be somebody that reminds them of the person that has caused them that trauma.
Right.
And so they're reacting to them at an unconscious level without even realizing what it is that's setting off that trigger for them. I think the really big difference is when we talk about trauma in the workplace, like workplace bullying trauma, if somebody has a trauma external to the workplace, when they come into the workplace, then it may be that, something has happened, but you can put support in place and get them, specialist support to be able to help with that.
Right.
When it is workplace bullying trauma, the workplace becomes the traumatizer.
Wow.
And actually what we do is we spend all of our time trying to get the person back to work, stay in work, back to work, all of those kind of things initially. And what we're actually doing is say, could you go back to the source of your trauma, please? So it's really quite a different thing once it becomes trauma in the workplace that is caused by the workplace, which is the result of being bullied.
That's so interesting. I never thought of that. Like the workplace being the traumatizer. I mean, wow. That's really incredible. Because then, obviously I can understand why people wouldn't want to come to work, and maybe they would, take time off and do everything to just avoid being in that space. So that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about the workplace physically being the traumatizer. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. And I hope you're taking notes. I'm talking about, people who are watching, and actually we have a few comments here. Okay, and I'm not sure has something. She says, oh dear, she says, when I was bullied, my mental health was damaged. And I was diagnosed with depression. I was in the job for 6 months. Even though I reported the bullying and told management I was treated for depression, they still fired me. Yeah, this is another, maybe another reason why people don't even speak up, I would say. Or what do you think?
Yeah, the majority of bullying cases are not upheld. When we look at kind of how much bullying there is in the workplace, in the USA, it's supposed to be around 30% of people who've experienced bullying and harassment in the workplace. It's about 27% in the UK. It's, been consistently at that level for years. And what happens is that they've discovered that more than 50% of people don't speak up at all.
Wow.
So they'll either just leave or they'll just put up with it.
Right.
Or the people who do speak up, something like, I haven't got exact figures, but something like over 90% of cases are not upheld. And so why would anybody want to speak up when they discover that actually if you speak up against it, you're usually the person who ends up leaving. You're usually the person who loses your job. You're punished for speaking up. And that is where, you haven't got that psychological safety. And that for me is really interesting when we look at speak up campaigns. And the whole idea of speak up campaigns seems to be, well, if you've got a problem, we'll give you a different way to report it. But when you do report it, the system is still the same at the end.
Nothing changes, yes.
Same. Yeah. So you have to do a lot of work to change working practices and culture in the organisation for a speak up campaign to be effective. Because speaking up should be about being able to bring positive ideas forward as well, not just about speaking up when things go wrong. Let's not wait for it to go wrong and then we'll speak up.
Yeah, I like that. I love what you said. And I kind of I remember when we first had a conversation, you talked about, being more preventive as opposed to being reactive. And we're going to come back to that later in this conversation. I just want to, we are having lots and lots of comments. So I want to just, social, highlight some of them. So Akere says, the behavioral climate of the workplace definitely influences productivity and effectiveness. Some organizational leaders believe that bullying gets the job done.
Yeah.
Crazy, but true. Unfortunately, sadly, bullying gets the job done haphazardly when the bullied has no other choice. I mean, this is a great point here. I'm sorry, I think I'm probably butchering her name. Akere, I think. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. But yeah, this is a great point. Some people feel like, we need to bully people to get the job done. And this is really...
And it comes back to my one of my least favorite phrases in the world, which is, I'm just a strong manager.
Right.
And I always say, who in the room has a certificate in strong management? It's not a real thing, okay? And we talk about it a lot, but actually, to a certain point, you can motivate through fear, but it will be a very short-term gain.
Absolutely.
And the ripple effect of that will be huge. And as Akira, as we're hoping we're saying that correctly, as she said, it is very much about the productivity reduces.